My name is Julie Perrine. I'm the founder and CEO of All Things Admin, and I'll be your host for this evening's Teleclass. I'm super excited that you are joining us for tonight's special guest, Bonnie Low-Kramen. Our topic tonight is a really important one because finding your voice takes courage and effort, but you'll be hard-pressed to find someone better to guide you on that incredible journey than Bonnie Low-Kramen. Bonnie is the best-selling author of Be the Ultimate Assistant, a celebrity assistant's secret to working with any high-powered employer. And she has worked for 25 years as a personal assistant to Oscar winner Olympia Dukakis and is one of the most respected voices in the profession. Bonnie is passionate and committed to improving the American workplace through the training of assistants and supporting them to find their voice. Bonnie is the co-founder of the New York Celebrity Assistants and is a contributing writer to business publications such as Glassdoor.com, Careerism.com, and the Executive Secretary magazine. Bonnie raises relevant and timely workplace issues written to inspire positive change in the relationships between assistants, employers, and coworkers. So please join me in a virtual warm welcome for Bonnie Low-Kramen as she takes us all on a journey to finding our voice, leaning in, and speaking up. Welcome, Bonnie.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for that lovely, lovely introduction. I am very moved. Thank you so much, and I'm a big fan of yours, too, truth be told.
Well, thank you.
It's wonderful to be here, and I want to welcome everyone to the Teleclass. You know, when I first started working with Olympia, I was on her staff at the Whole Theater in New Jersey, in northern New Jersey, in Montclair. And when I began there, a long time ago at the age of 29, Olympia would say about me in staff meetings, she'd say to other people, when is the tall one going to talk? And so believe me, it took me a very long time to find my own voice. This happens to be a subject that's very personal to me. And those of you who know me know that is the case. But first, I want to bring everyone up to speed. As you mentioned, Julie, I worked for 25 years as the personal assistant to Oscar winner Olympia Dukakis. And a year and a half ago, I made a now or never decision. I resigned from my job. I didn't have to do it, but I decided to do it in order to pursue my passion. I found my voice and I said, I am leaving. What I did was I designed the workshop for assistants that I wished had existed when I first started, only better because it has a solid technology piece taught by the amazing Vicki Sokol-Evans. And I hope that some of you will join us as we move with the workshop around the country. Finding your voice is most definitely a part of the training, and in fact, it's a part of most every presentation that I give. I've learned quite a few things in 25 years, and one of those things that I know for certain is that the number one challenge facing assistants in our workplace is the issue of finding your voice. It's a topic that has spurred literally hundreds of comments over the LinkedIn groups, and it is a subject I get asked the most questions about. It's a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is that speaking up is indeed a big problem in our profession. The good news is that solutions are within very close reach. I want to share one brief but very telling story. I gave a presentation a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to name cities, and I'm going to make up names, because really these stories, which I've chosen carefully, can apply to any city, anywhere. At this presentation about finding your voice, we had a great time in a 4-hour workshop, and that was on a Saturday. And on Saturday night, I received an email from one of the participants, and she wrote to tell me that she had not asked for reimbursement for the workshop or the hotel room. She just hadn't built up the courage to do that with her manager, and she didn't know what he was going to say, so she didn't ask, and she paid for it herself. After our session, after our workshop, and it was very interactive and a lot of sharing of other stories besides mine, she told me this ahead of time, that she was going to go in Monday morning and ask her manager for reimbursement, and that she just felt that she had to do it. And I gave her support to do it. I told her, gave her a little bit more coaching, and then off the email went. On Monday, I received an email back from her. She told me that she went to her manager. He not only said yes, but he said to her, the next time you want to take a workshop, I would just appreciate it if you told me ahead of time. So a lot of lessons there. Now, I know that in my career, I've dealt with many strong personalities, and we often think of show business as filled with strong personalities, and that's true. And in that career, I often wrestled with the issue of finding my voice, both professionally and personally. But I know that you also are dealing with strong personalities. Please know that everything I'm going to talk about in this teleclass, I know about firsthand. In my speaking and teaching, I've connected with literally thousands of assistants around the world, so I have the perspective and know that our profession is filled with strong and sometimes difficult personalities, not only from our managers, but from our coworkers as well. And these issues are also universal. I can tell you that the stories of bullying, for example, are shockingly similar around the world. When we were in England, I remember thinking to myself, the problem can't possibly be so bad here in England, until I began to speak to assistants over there and asked the questions directly. And they assured me in no uncertain terms that bullying is rampant around Europe. Worse in certain countries than others. Italy is particularly bad, for example. Now, let me be clear up front. The subject is messy and complicated, and there are no black and white answers. I'm so glad that Julie is not allowing that to stop us, though. I'm delighted that she asked me to talk about this. After all, we have to start somewhere. So as I move forward for the next, 45 minutes or so, be sure to write down your questions and be ready to, type them in, and Julie will share them. Nothing is off limits, not as far as I'm concerned. We're going to get to as many questions as possible, and I want you to know that you're welcome to email me afterwards if there's something important that we don't get to or something sensitive that you'd rather not have, on the computer screen and audio taped. I can understand that. All right. Now, as I said, I believe that the number one problem in our workplace is speaking up, or rather the reluctance and the inability to speak up when we know we should, but we don't. There's far too much fear in our workplace, bullying, disrespect, and suffering in silence. How do I know this? Well, one way is that I hear from assistants from all over who contact me for help to find a new job because they're quitting their jobs because of a bullying situation in their office, either with their manager or with a coworker. And here's the thing that gets me. They're quitting before they ever have a conversation with the person they're having the problem with. To me, this is a lose-lose situation. The manager is losing someone who is trained, and the assistant is now unemployed. So despite the economy and the job market, it still feels easier and safer for the assistant to quit than to confront the difficult issue of bullying. Now, I know about the problem professionally. I know how it feels to be mute, to not know the words to say, to feel paralyzed. I also know about this personally, having been in an abusive relationship for too many years until I found my voice, which began with a whisper and finally said enough. I'm living proof that good things can happen when we take the risk to speak up. And what I know for sure is that silence is the enemy. The great news is that when you begin the practice of speaking about the elephant in the room, which is the image on the front of your handouts, it not only gets easier and easier, but you have increased self-confidence, self-esteem, self-respect, and the respect of others. And just think back to that story I began with a few moments ago. You know, how much more self-respect does that admin have now? So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to figure out ways to stop this dynamic, this damaging dynamic, this destructive dynamic. And that's why we're here tonight, to shed a bright light on these issues. My fondest hope is that we not only have assistants listening in, but we also have managers and human resources professionals. We need to have an open dialogue about what's really going on. The issue of finding your voice reflects on and impacts many aspects of an assistant's work: our leadership abilities, promotability, marketability, and our ability to negotiate for ourselves. So it really has far-reaching impact. So thank you again, Julie, for allowing this discussion to take place tonight. Now let's for a moment take a look at the big picture. There are 4.1 million assistants in the United States, and 95% of us are women. In the United Kingdom, it's 98% women. That's domination. And these statistics are important because it directly affects how we deal with one another in the workplace. As a group, women are not socialized or encouraged to speak up. So it's really no surprise that there are problems. The heart of the issue, though, is that you're not alone. So what about all of this bullying, which is also called managing by intimidation? 51% of all the offices in America report incidences of bullying. If any of you have been reading the LinkedIn discussion group comments on this subject, perhaps you were stunned, like I have been, by some of the jaw-dropping stories there. Bullying behaviors can be verbal, physical, emotional. Both women and men are bullies, and not all bullying happens between managers and assistants. Some of the worst bullying happens between coworkers. When we suffer in silence, we pay a huge price, as we read on these comment threads, and from what I hear directly from assistants who report stress-related illnesses, obesity, depression, lack of sleep. I personally know 3 assistants who have been hospitalized with nervous breakdowns. There's a problem. Here's one big question that I ask to all my audiences. Is it possible to do excellent work when you're feeling distracted, depressed, sad, angry, tense? And in the room, everyone starts shaking their heads no. It's a big fat no. So what can we do? What's the answer? One of the reasons why there's so much suffering in silence, it's because we're struggling for the words to say. What are the actual words to say? Some of the words to say are things like, Julie, I think we can do a better job in communicating. Can we set up a time to talk? I know that we have some difficulties. Why don't we try to resolve them? You're speaking to the elephant in the room, the thing that everybody knows is there, but no one wants to say. And, Joan, I'm making that up, I can see that something's bothering you. Can I help? You're saying the things that everyone is thinking. Now, on your handouts, which I want to call your attention to, the first sheet after the first one is a resource sheet. It's got some really great books listed. And one of the best ones about the dynamic of bullying is Taming the Abrasive Manager by Laura Crawshaw. And then, of course, there's the emotional intelligence one. The fourth one down is Speaking Your Mind in 101 Difficult Situations. It's a wonderful book, $4.99 on Amazon. I went on the search for the words to say. What do we literally say to the person we're having difficulty with? And these books show the way. They offer the actual verbiage to use. Now, when you decide, the strategy to confront, to finally confront, and the word confront, by the way, gets a very bad rap. I think, and especially as women, we think of the word confront as that it has to be mean and ugly and loud and nasty. And the truth is that in order for it to be effective, I call it positive confrontation, it doesn't have to be any of those things. What you do need to do, though, is to choose your battle. You definitely want to choose which fight you're going to fight. And you need to choose your moment. It's helpful to get the person alone. You definitely don't want to publicly humiliate someone. That is a huge no-no. And practicing is extremely important. Planning ahead and literally saying the words out loud to get out your tension, to plan the thoughts one after another. You need to stay calm and clear and direct. It's the best way to do it is if you're in person and looking a person in the eye. Many women say to me, well, Bonnie, I can't stop crying. I can't stop getting emotional. Practicing will help minimize that. And certainly the reason to not cry and to definitely keep your emotions in check is because we're so easily dismissed if we show emotion and we cry. So it is simply more effective to stay clear and calm and not go on and on. Be very practiced, whether it's negotiating for your salary increase or saying how the meeting on Tuesday was not a happy situation for you, that you want to talk about how your presentation was reacted to. And it's important to plan what it is you have to say and to communicate the clarity that you have about it, that you are sure about it. Now, when you present a problem and a solution, it shows you're being proactive and it's respected. And here's the thing, that when you decide, when you take the leap, that you build up your courage and you have a conversation with the person you're having difficulty with, it lets the other person know that if you're capable of doing it once, you're capable of doing it again. And the relationship may not, it probably won't change 100%, but it may change 20%, 25%. And trust me, the person you're talking to will think twice before bullying you again. What you do when you confront in a positive way is you're changing the relationship. You're changing the dynamic. Now, there is another reason why we have difficulty in the workplace as 95% women, that I believe that we work in a contradiction, that the nature of being an admin means that we work in a contradiction. And here's what I mean by that. That in our job descriptions, we work in support of, we are nurturing, and we are behind the scenes, and we're often invisible. And that means quiet. That means silent. And then, on a moment's notice, we as admins are required to be front and center and speaking our minds and saving the day in whatever situation it is. And, hurry up in here, Julie, we need you. And it's a staff meeting. There's a crisis, and we need you to step up to the plate. So this having to move on a dime between invisibility and being front and center, it can feel schizophrenic. And that's another reason why not everyone can be an admin. It also is the source of some of our problem, because if we go along for a long enough time being invisible and behind the scenes, and then it catches us off guard, doesn't it, when we're forced to be front and center and required to, cover for our manager, whatever. So if it's true that speaking up is the number one challenge, then what is stopping us? And of course, it seems pretty obvious. What's stopping us is fear. The word fear comes up quite a lot in our workshops. Assistants will say to me, Bonnie, I can't speak up to my manager. I'm afraid of losing my job. That's the one I hear the most. And I say that if you keep on taking what you're taking, I'm afraid you're going to lose you. You know, what I also know is that those fears are often unfounded. The fear that you're going to lose your job, unless you go in with profanity blazing, yes, in our workshops I've had assistants say, Bonnie, I did do that and I did lose my job. That has happened. I will admit that. But it's the exception. Most of the time the hands are raising and that they did take the risk to speak up, and positive things happened. Good things happened when it was done in a logical, rational, reasonable way. And only you know how this has played out in your own life, and I hope your comments and your questions will reflect that. But in addition to the fear of losing your job, there are many other fears in play in the workplace that are stopping us from acting on our voices. Fear of being yelled at, fear of being wrong, fear of being told no, fear of being seen as a troublemaker and making waves, fear of appearing stupid, unprepared, uninformed, and on and on. Now, I can tell you, when I was the tall one who wasn't talking back at the whole theater, for me, truth be told, it was afraid of appearing stupid, of appearing uninformed. And then what started happening is that I had the answers. I absolutely had the answers, and I began giving them. And again, it's about practice and all of that. We do such a number on ourselves, and that's when I began to think we really need to shed light on this. We need to talk about this, because in doing so, I see the transformation right in front of my eyes. So at this point, I want to share the story of Barbara, not her real name. Barbara is an admin who's been working for 20 years. She's been working as the assistant to the CEO of a company in our country, and she's a very experienced, capable, competent assistant. And I was coaching Barbara 2 weeks prior to her annual review. And in the course of our conversation, she came right out and said, Bonnie, I'm afraid of speaking up. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel confident. And she told me that she had a great relationship with her CEO. They have a great way of communicating with each other. And as we talked about the review, we talked about how it should be a two-way conversation, how she should come in prepared and have questions and comments and ideas. And that these days, CEOs very much want their assistants to be partners and project managers, and to be the boss, to be the CEO is a challenge for them. And that, two qualities that really help us in the workplace are respect and empathy, putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. So there she went to her annual review and, just tried to encourage her that her CEO manager absolutely wanted to hear what she had to say. So I received an email from her back the day after her review, and she said, it went great. George, not his name, and the team are very pleased with my performance. And I hope you're sitting down for this, she writes. He wants me to attend an IAAP or AMA seminar to continue my professional development. I could not believe it. George supports me to go to school this fall, too. My raise was more than I expected, and my performance rating exceeds. As you suggested, I went in with my questions written down, and we had a great conversation. I felt very proud when I left his office. Bonnie, one of the things I wrote down while you and I were talking was speak up. Respect is gained when you speak up. I did that when I completed the self-review and when I gave him an idea about our contest trips that he liked. I have to get it through my head that I am worthy and I have value. And if my manager doesn't always agree with the idea that I have, it doesn't mean that I have no value. Thank you for your support. Barbara. Now, of course, that email made me feel great, but I told Barbara that I read it in my classes and presentations because it's so inspiring for others to hear about someone who's gone through that and come out the other side with great results. And get this little part of the story. When she sent him the email initially to ask him to take the coaching with me, to take the class with me, she told me the story about how she remembers sweating and being so nervous about sending the email to him. So she waited, finally hit the send button, and then she couldn't take her eyes off the screen. And the email back to her came within 30 seconds, maybe less, she said. And she opened it up, and it simply said 2 words, of course. So I'm trying to highlight the fact that our fears sometimes are wrong. They're just plain wrong. And I laugh because I've done that too. So my hope is to cut all of you to the chase and to inspire you to take a shot, you know. One thing that is definitely going to help in the situation and in the effort to find our voices is to find strong role models and mentors. If we don't, bullying and fear in our workplace is everyone's problem. If we don't figure this out, how to make changes, our daughters and our sons will be wrestling with them too. My own son is 25. I would love to see us take a shot at this, to really, in companies large and small, to figure out ways to get to the leaders, to the CEOs, to the managers, to help them understand that this is the opposite of smart business, to allow this dynamic to continue. In the workplace of 2013, because our profession is 95% women, women must support one another, mentor one another, help one another to succeed. Now, I understand that this means rejecting old, entrenched stereotypes, but there it is. I think the LinkedIn discussion groups are a fabulous vehicle for sharing solid information and many different points of view, but it does not substitute for in-person mentoring where you can air serious subjects particular to your situation. You know, I had a conversation just today with a very experienced admin, 27 years she's been working as an admin, and I thought of her as one of the strongest people I knew in the business, and even she shared with me how she was bullied in her workplace, and she quit. She was one of those women who I spoke about, and she too did not have the conversation before she left. And we must help one another change this. Now, she says that she's really relieved to be out of that situation, and I do understand that there are times when it's time to leave. You know, we all get to that point in a job where it's time to leave, and it's, you know, in my case, it wasn't about bullying at all. It's just time to go. So, you know, there is an end time. There's an end time to most things. But this dynamic is going to continue for the younger admins coming up behind us unless we can figure out a different way to change it up, to move it along the spectrum 25%, 30%, and we will, make some strides in that way. For me, I was very lucky to have a fabulous mentor in Olympia, and I had the opportunity to watch what happened when we would be in meetings, dozens of meetings, and inevitably there would be a tricky issue, a situation that needed to be aired and that everyone was thinking about and no one had the nerve to say. And, of course, I call that the elephant in the room. And Olympia would inevitably be the one to state the problem. And when she finally said it, when she would say the words, I could see the visible relief in the room. Perhaps you've seen that yourself. And I could see the bodies just like take a breath, and the shoulders would just kind of go down. And then after she finally said it, we can't move forward with that project unless we have another $50,000. Like, oh, thank you. Somebody finally said the thing that everyone was thinking. And again, I saw it right in front of my very eyes. So I learned early on the value of breaking the silence and speaking to that elephant in the room so that you can move on, so that it doesn't, we don't have to waste any more time being distracted and worried and trying to get around it and not wanting to, everyone's so worried about each other's feelings, and you don't want to be the messenger, the expression, let's not kill the messenger. It's about these fears. And we as women, as Sheryl Sandberg says, we're in a double bind, but more about that in just a moment. I want to share with you a story from a presentation that I gave several months back, but some of these stories just stick with me, and boy, I can't get them out of my head. During the Q&A, we were discussing bullying behaviors and the effort to build healthy and respectful relationships between managers and staff. And this one very attractive, experienced admin stands up, and she starts to tell us the story of her recent job interview. And she was interviewing with a man who had a reputation as a yeller. But for whatever reason, she wanted the job. She wanted the job at this company. She wanted this position. And she was telling us that it was getting to be towards the end of the interview and that she could tell that she was going to get the job. You know how you can just tell. You see it going well, and he's asking questions, probably things like, when can you start, kind of questions. And she decided to take a breath, and she garnered her courage, and she took a leap here. She said, excuse me, I can tell you want to hire me, but here's the thing. If you and I work together, you cannot yell at me. You cannot yell at me alone, and you cannot yell at me in front of people. I will do excellent work for you, but I cannot do excellent work if I'm yelled at. And he was surprised. She described that he looked a little bit shocked. He took a breath. He took a pause, and he looked at her, and he thought about it, and he said, okay, I can commit to that. You're hired. So she begins. And indeed, he kept his word. But here's the thing. He did not yell at her, either alone or in person or in front of anyone. What he did do was he continued yelling at everyone else in the office. And what she described, everyone in the room was laughing at that, but then when everyone stopped laughing, she said that she lasted 3 months and then she quit. She, as a witness to bullying, she paid a price also. And that's what the statistics say, is that the witnesses to bullying pay almost as high a price as the person who's being bullied in the first place, because people who are witnessing it feel guilty that they're not doing anything, and that kind of destructive dynamic. And here's the thing. When these behaviors are permitted to go on in companies, it has to begin at the top, because HR really can't do anything about it if the behaviors are being supported from management. And it really doesn't take a lot of imagination to understand that these behaviors, if people are quitting, if it's true, as assistants are telling me that they're quitting their jobs, this revolving door of staff is costing companies a lot of money. And not to mention the physical toll that it's taking on actual staff, and then even more money is being spent because of sick days that are being taken, and that means productivity is going down and morale is down. And even if someone is staying at their job and they're this unhappy, as I mentioned before, is it possible to do excellent work while you're feeling like that? A lot of assistants I know are busy looking for a new job on company time. So it doesn't serve anyone. It's a lose-lose situation, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about these things. I've begun talking to CEOs of companies around the country. I've been on the search for CEOs who are doing it well, and I love reading articles like the one I read in Inc. magazine a couple of weeks ago about the company DreamWorks, the Jeffrey Katzenberg, the film company, Geffen and Spielberg, I think. Yes, DreamWorks. And they've got a 96% retention rate, employee retention rate. And why? The article says that the employees there are treated with a great deal of respect, to the point that during company time they are encouraged to take classes. Now, one of the very bright spots on the horizon, as I see it, happened in March. In March, Sheryl Sandberg came out with her new book called Lean In. Lean In, Women, Work, and the Will to Lead. Some of my friends have said to me, Bonnie, has Sheryl Sandberg taken out a restraining order on you yet? Because I'm such a raving fan of this woman. She's the COO of Facebook, 43 years old, 2 little kids, 7 and 5. She's married. She's not a radical feminist by any means. She's Harvard educated, and she has written a book that I believe is very important to all women and all men. What she's done is she's reopened the conversation about what it really means to be a working woman in the workplace of 2013. She points to the fact that there are only 14% of all CEOs in our country are women, and that we need more females in positions of power in order to balance the sensibility that companies are reflecting, that companies need to reflect who's working in them, and who's working in them are typically the percentages are around 50-50 female to male. So the book is so well researched, and for example, the Stanford University Department on Gender Studies consulted on the book, and the last 34 pages are references and her research. It reads some in there anyway. It reads like a thesis. It's genius, and I am so grateful that she wrote this, and I'm frankly happy that I lived to see the day. Men are paying close attention to this, and I'm excited by the fact, for example, that on the back of the book, Richard Branson of Virgin wrote a quote, and I read in the Wall Street Journal that John Chambers of Cisco Systems, the computer company in the Silicon Valley, John Chambers read the book, loved the book, gave a copy of the book to every member of his senior management team and expected a report back on how to improve the relationships between women and men in the workplace. That what Sheryl Sandberg is referring to by leaning in is what we're talking about tonight, about finding our voices. She's saying not only do women need to sit at the table, and not only the management table, admins with their managers sitting at the table and leaning into the conversation, really being present and acknowledged and heard. It's important that, in my workshops, I talk about how, as admins, we know we're the eyes and ears for our managers. We're expected to know things and hear things. Well, I'm here to root you on and to give permission, if you will, say that you have a responsibility and an obligation to speak up, that you're being paid for a reason, that we're being paid, some admins, varying salaries, but you're being paid a salary for that last component as well. And that in job interviews and in weekly conversations, it's important to say to your manager, I have an idea about something. May I share it with you? The act of asking if it's all right, if you do, is fine. And then when you turn out to be right, when you turn out to have a better idea, I firmly believe that assistants often know better than our managers about many things, and that we often hear and see things that our managers would never see. I certainly know that from my work with Olympia. People would say things to me that they would never say to her. And then I would have to be judicious about what piece of that information would I actually share with her. That we are gatekeepers, that we hold a great deal of responsibility, and it is the smart managers who see the untapped potential in admins and understand that you know a great deal. You are intelligent and resourceful and experienced. In my presentations, it moves me so when there are assistants in the room, not only who have been working 5, 10 years, but 20, 25, 30 years. That is a great deal of information that you all hold. And all of us benefit from Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. I strongly recommend it, and if you check it out and check out the reviews, and don't spend a penny just because I'm saying so, but in my opinion, it is an important piece of work that is absolutely going to impact our profession and our world. She says in there, it's a new landscape. It's a new world out there. We need a new approach about the ways in which women and men are relating to each other. And women, she says it in the book, that one way we're going to move forward in a positive way is for women to help one another, that we need to actively seek out mentors. And we don't have to mentor others in everything. We can mentor others in one thing that we're great at. There's great value in talking with opening up the conversation with our colleagues and ask the question, what do you do really well? And what are you worried about? And what can I help you to succeed? To literally say these words there is powerful, is really powerful. And I like to think I practice what I preach. One of the reasons I'm doing the Teleclass tonight is I want Julie Perrine to know that I am supportive of her efforts, that I want her to fly and to succeed, and that by Julie succeeding, we all succeed. That is the point. So I'm eager for you to share your success stories with one another and with us, if you would. And your stories are inspiring and empowering, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. And when you take the risk to be vulnerable with your colleague, they will as well. And it gets easier. Is confronting ever easy, though? I don't think so. I really don't think it is. We're wasting a lot of valuable time sitting in grudges that go on for months and years. And seriously, I know what I'm suggesting is breaking a lot of old habits. But from where I sit after more than a 25-year career, those behaviors are not serving us anymore. And when I say that in presentations, when I say, we really, really need to support one another and not be so competitive and all those negative words that are usually attributed to women as catty, et cetera. I don't even want to give them value and respect by uttering them. Let us choose the other way. And I then see all the nodding heads. Yes, that is the way to do it. So in support and in collaboration, in partnership. And that will be a win-win. That will be the win-win situation. So before we begin the Q&A, I want to emphasize that really good things happen when you take the risk to speak up. I'm rooting you on to do it. As I said earlier, if you like, you can feel free to write me, and I'll give you my take on whatever situation you throw by me. We need to do this for one another as women, as human beings who believe, as I do, that by finding our voices, we can actually change the world. So thank you very much. And Julie, thank you very much. I'd love to answer questions, hear what you have to say. Talk to me.
Wow, that was fantastic. I have notes on little Post-its and around the handout in various cryptic ways. So I've heard you share a lot of this before, Bonnie, and I get something new every time. So thank you for sharing that tonight with all of us again and inspiring me in some new directions as well. So let me explain quickly how the Q&A works here, and then there's several other things I've asked Bonnie to share about some upcoming workshops and about how to get her book and how to get in contact with her and all of those important things, because I know I am certain this probably has inspired several of you to reach out and connect with Bonnie directly and to find out more about what she has for training and resources to support you outside of this teleclass this evening as well. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So while I am checking to see if there's any questions that have come in, Bonnie, if you could share a little bit about the upcoming workshops that you have both in Dallas and London and tell people a little bit about what those are and how they can learn more about them, that would be awesome.
Right. Thanks, Julie. Our workshop is a 2-day weekend workshop called Be the Ultimate Assistant, and it's 3 hours of the 15 hours is technology with Vicki Sokol-Evans, who in my mind is the best technology trainer in the country. And when I was designing the workshop, I realized that it was not possible to offer training to be an ultimate assistant without both the soft skills and the hard skills. The soft skills of communication, problem solving, organizing, and there's a big component about communication and finding your voice and handling difficult situations, which inevitably are going to happen in the workplace. So we're headed to Dallas. Vicki and I, she's based in Austin, I'm based in New Jersey, and we just meet wherever we do these classes. And we're headed to Dallas on June 8 and 9. We still have a few spots open. Our association rate is $449 for both days. We're at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Dallas, and they're going to be rolling out the red carpet for us. So you can find the link on my website, which is bonnielowkramen.com. We would love to have you. The 2 days includes all materials and breakfast and lunch on both days, which at the Ritz is going to be quite lovely. And we're going to be headed to London to do the same workshop in July 4th and 5th. And our fall schedule is coming together. We're looking at cities, San Francisco, Chicago, Los Angeles, and Seattle. So we're open to other cities if we have interest. You know, our belief is we want to take the workshop to the assistants rather than, you know, set up shop in Jersey, say, and say, come to us. No, we want to go to the assistants, and we care, both of us care very deeply about the training and education for assistants, because for too long there has been so little. I can't tell you how many companies we've been to where it's the first time ever that there's been training for the administrative staff, some very big-name companies, too. So I invite you, and it's what's interesting with these companies, it's the EAs, the admins, who are going to the managers and saying, we need this training. We want to bring in Bonnie and Vicki, or sometimes we go in separately as well. So thanks for asking, Julie. But my website is a great place to find all of that. And my book as well, Be the Ultimate Assistant. You're welcome to read all the reviews on Amazon, and I'm happy to know that it's giving people some very solid resources as an overview of the business of being an assistant, which is not for everybody, as we all know, right?
That is true. And as I was flipping back through, because I hadn't looked at your book in a while, some of the resources that you share that are, you know, how to find specialty things or last-minute requests from your employer. One of the things I loved, and I haven't ever had to do this, but how to hold a plane.
Yeah.
If you have somebody who's late for a plane that needs to get on there, I was like, oh, man, this is good stuff. So,
yeah. Well, it helps if you're a rock star, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Because it's not something the airlines would ever advertise, I'll tell you.
That is true, but it's still a great tactics that sometimes if you're creative and innovative, you can apply them in some resourceful ways. So very good.
Oh, yeah. We call them save the day stories or pulling off miracle stories, right?
Yep, absolutely. Well, we have had a couple of comments and or questions submitted through the Q&A online. So let me
fire away.
Start off with the first one. Elizabeth says, just one of my stories about bullying. You are more than welcome to use it as an example. I was bullied in the workplace years ago. I didn't fit into the culture, and I was the token Jew. One of the architectural designers I worked with told me, you don't run into that often. I had endless problems with the people I worked with, and they let the senior admin carry a gun at work because she had a permit to carry a concealed weapon. I had a run-in with one of the guys I worked for, and I was fired that day. So that was just the story that she wanted to share. And then I have a question that she follows up with that, and she asks, how do you think this translates, and I think she's referring to the topic of finding your voice and leaning in, speaking up. How do you think this translates into the work situations for virtual assistants?
Oh, into virtual. It's trickier with virtual assistants, I think, because, thankfully for Skype, I believe that if a virtual assistant, and of course there's more and more of them every single day, if there's a difficult situation to be handled between a virtual assistant and a client, or with anyone, I think if it's impossible to get together face-to-face because you're a world away or however many miles away, then seeing one another is pretty important. I mean, certainly over the phone right now, you know, I'm doing my best to communicate tone and to mood, but you don't have the benefit of seeing my face and my eyes. And when it comes to tricky material, sensitive situation, a money issue, for example, email is inadequate. Texting is awful. I think it's really important to try to get a face-to-face interaction because it's so easy to be snarky and nasty and flip and sarcastic possibly in the electronic mediums that we have. I think it's a challenge to deal with that in the virtual world. But other VAs would have to address this personally, I think. But I hear a lot. One thing I've heard, and this isn't exactly related, but I hear from assistants who say, my manager doesn't want to talk to me at all. He just wants to text and email. He doesn't want to talk on the phone, and he doesn't want to talk in person. And what I say to them is, that's not okay. You have needs too. That might be what he thinks he wants, but if you know better, if we agree that you know better about certain things, it's important that that's the point where you open your mouth and say, I hear what you're saying, but this is the reason why I think thus and so. And then, by the way, and Julie,
yes,
if I get cut off, I may have to call back in. In fact, I'm going to dial right back in. I want to address the Jewish issue. Okay.
Okay. And in the meantime, I'm going to share my experience from a virtual assistant perspective.
Fine. I'm going to call right back in.
No problem. One of the things I would share about this from speaking up and finding your voice as a virtual assistant or even working virtually with a team, more and more of the corporate environments that executive and administrative assistants are supporting are virtual teams. You're in one city and you're supporting executives and team members in cities around the world or around the country, or in some cases you are supporting a manager who maybe has an office next to you but is on the road 90% of the time. And that was the situation I found myself in even when I started my virtual assistant business. I thought, if I can support these traveling executives who are, primarily not here, or when they are here, we're still communicating by text and BlackBerry messages from a conference room, and, it was all electronic and digital. I'm like, I can do this sitting in my home office while they are, out wherever they're at working virtually. And so what I've learned though over the course of, I have significantly downsized my VA side of my business as All Things Admin has gotten bigger, but I still have a couple of clients that I support. And we just had a situation recently where one of my clients had an idea about something that I didn't agree with, and in some cases I wasn't even sure was completely on the right side of things legally. And it wasn't that they were trying to violate the law, they just didn't know the law. And so I did some research on my own, and I presented what I thought was the potential issue. And the email I got back was, and basically they had asked me to handle something that I wasn't comfortable handling because of what I had learned about what I thought wasn't right on the legal side of it. And the client responded back, fine, I'll handle it. And that to me meant, well, you're raising an issue I don't want to address or that I don't want to, spend a lot of time on. And ultimately, so initially I didn't feel bad because I knew that in order for me to be comfortable with my involvement in the project, that I needed to make sure we were doing it legally and above board, and that I had raised the question and had documented it so that if anything ever came back and there was a problem, that I was covered from a legal perspective and just for me as a professional. But What's been interesting is over the course of the past 4 weeks, what has happened is I figured out that by raising that question, my client was forced to ask the question of his attorney and the team that is providing counsel and advice to him. And I was right.
Good for you, Julie. Good for you.
Yeah, and it was one of those really good feelings of, oh, thank God I was right, and thank God I raised the question, because it could have been such a huge mess. And what it has happened is it's been kind of a nightmare with the paperwork that they've had to go through to make it right. And nothing had gone wrong, but in order to keep things going right, they had to do a bunch of things to make it work the way it needs to. But by raising that question, and even though I got kind of a snarky email back, and even though all of our communication has been virtual in this process, what I've found with the virtual component is getting on the phone and having a phone call really can help, even if you can't see them, as opposed to just shooting emails and text messages back and forth. So that has really helped. But the one book Bonnie has on her list that I refer to as required reading for all humankind is the book Crucial Conversations, because it truly helps you learn how to manage the emotional response, because you learn the signals that your body will give you when it starts to kind of reach that fight or flight mode. And by applying those principles that I learned by reading that book, and I use them on a daily basis and lots of interactions, whether they're, good or bad, you learn to read people and watch for the signs and signals that they're giving you as well, and to make it safe and start with heart and come at it from a, not an accusatory perspective, but it makes it less of a confrontation and more of a, how can we resolve this?
Right. Hey, let's take another question, right?
Yep, excellent. One of the, let's see here, let me refresh my screen again. All right. One of the questions was related to how do you feel that appearance, I'm assuming from a clothing or attire perspective, either helps or hinders how you're treated at the office, like how you're heard, or even I probably would say even from a bullying perspective, maybe how people perceive or receive you as the assistant supporting them.
Yeah, I think appearance absolutely matters, without a doubt. I just got back from a week-long conference, and there were some women there who were dressed really sexy, tight clothes, low-cut tops, and I saw how they were treated, and they were treated, more like toys. They really weren't looked at in their faces. Their bodies were being stared at, and so that's a choice that we make. That it's just the way we're perceived by the way we speak and the way we write. We're also perceived by the way we dress and the way we want to be viewed by the world. And so if you're ever in doubt about how you're coming across, I think it would be important to ask someone who loves you and who you trust and who you give permission to be deadly honest with you about. That's the key. I think clothing, while we might say it shouldn't impact, it does without question. And it impacts how men are dressed as well. But I think it's a contributing factor. I don't think I don't think we should dress like men. But I think there is guidance to be had here, and it really depends on your office. Certainly in the land of personal assistants, the dress is more casual than in corporate land, and some offices have specific rules about these kinds of things. But perception is absolutely dictated by all of those factors. Dress is pretty prominent because it's so immediate. The way you speak and the way you write is less obvious, but I think you get the point. I hope that helps. I feel pretty strongly about it. I think it matters a lot.
Perfect. Another question from Angela, it looks like. How do you go about identifying or choosing or picking out a mentor, and then how do you interact with them, or how do you engage with them, especially if it's more of like a non-paid type relationship?
Right. There are a couple of different strategies that you can try. One way is to offer help to someone. If you can identify someone who you think you'd like as a mentor, you can find out what project they're currently working on and offering to volunteer on it, or volunteer on a piece of it to see if you can actually work together on something. And another strategy would be to say, could you have a 15-minute phone meeting or a 30-minute coffee with them, and then honor that. I mean, this strategy is, there's a chapter in Sheryl Sandberg's book called Will You Be My Mentor? And she talks about this, that it's tricky. You know, we all are so pressed for time. So if you ask for someone for 15 minutes or 30 minutes to have coffee, honor that. Keep to that. Respect that. And, you know, one of the things in the book, which I firmly believe, is be generous with help. That sometimes the path to a mentor is a little windy, and it may be about offering help first before you then get the chance to say, and by the way, can I pick your brain about thus and so? And none of us are walking around with signs around our necks that say mentor, but I believe teachers are everywhere, and that we can have multiple mentors. That it doesn't just have to be one mentor, and it happens organically.
Very true.
So that's what I think about it, and Sheryl Sandberg's book, I got some of that from the book. You know, I was lucky. I worked for my mentor in Olympia Dukakis, but I had many, many, many other mentors through New York Celebrity Assistants, for example, and they would mentor me in, you know, certain particular things. You know, one of them was a foodie. I'm not a foodie. She would mentor me in everything about, you know, restaurants and different kinds of food and blah, blah, blah. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, and sometimes I even say that some of the mentors I would list as mentors of mine are virtual mentors. They don't even know. I just go to their websites or I interact with them on social media, and so it's not necessarily there's a personal interaction, but you were talking about the Celebrity Assistance Group. Professional associations or organizations can really be a great resource, and it's a great way for you to give those ideas and share what you're the best at with others, and then they can share the same things, you know, other things back with you. So that's a great tip.
Oh, right. And get this, on LinkedIn, this has happened to me many times. In fact, I'm having dinner with one of them tomorrow night. There was, on LinkedIn discussion groups, there would be a comment given by someone who clearly, you know, had a command of the subject, and I would engage that person. I'd say, wow, I really loved what you wrote, and I'm really interested in whatever it was. And I think on 3 different occasions, that one guy is in Australia. I Skyped with him. Tomorrow night, I'm actually having dinner with someone who I met on LinkedIn, and in a way, they're mentors. But it began by me being interested in what they had to say, and I have to say that the older I'm getting, the more I'm just following my instincts. And if someone clearly has has such a strong passion or take on a subject, typically it's about bullying, but other subjects as well, I just follow up and see where it goes, because people love to talk about the thing that they're passionate about. So I certainly hope you find your way towards a mentor and be a mentor. One way to get a mentor is to be one, because you never know who those people lead you to. And here's the other thing about, you know, with women, one of the old stereotypes is that we keep score. Let's stop keeping score, shall we? You know, that, Julie, you might need 10 things this week. I'm going to give you 10 things. And then, you know, a month down the road, I might need 15 things. And my hope is that you're going to give them to me.
Absolutely. I love that. One other question that ties into this from Mary, and she's asking if I'm interested in coaching or working with a coach to help me on a more individual basis, how do you present or get approval from your executive to engage in the coaching type training versus just going to an event or a conference? What's the best way to sell that to my executive?
What's the best way to sell that? Well, with the particular woman I was talking about, we called it a virtual class. And indeed, we called it a virtual class. And she shared my credentials with her manager, and I set out the syllabus, and, it was all on the up and up, but it was, that particular part of the class ended up turning out to be coaching. So you could call it that. Many companies have training budgets, and I think it's about honestly identifying the areas where you need support. And different companies handle it in different ways, and I invite you to contact me if I can be helpful to you in that way. I would like to be. But what I encourage admins to do is to not let money stop this process of learning. That in order for us to keep going and to advance and excel in our careers, we must be always learning. We have to commit to lifelong learning. And the smart companies are going to be the ones who actually make the financial investment in the administrative staff, which is an amazingly underserved population of people. And in part, it's two ways of fault here, that HR and our executives have missed the boat on this in a big way, and I'm hopeful that I'm going to be part of the team of people around the country to wake some folks up. And on the other hand, you heard the story that I said at the beginning, that the assistant herself just didn't want to take the risk to ask, and when she did ask, it was not a fight at all. It was, yes, just tell me next time if you want to do it ahead of time.
Yep, I love that. That was our last question, but you wanted to readdress the one point that was asked earlier or mentioned about the comment, I didn't fit into the culture and I was the token Jew.
Right. Okay. Right. All right. Years ago, and this will show you I practice what I preach. That story reminded me. I too am Jewish, and I was in Texas, and I was applying for a job at Texas A&M University, and I was going to be doing their entertainment programming. They needed someone to do the show business stuff. They had a lot of technical and engineering people down there. If anyone knows about Texas A&M, it's a pretty serious place. And I recall my last interview, I was sitting in a circle with 14 staffers, on the people who worked at the student center there and who were in charge of all the student programming. And I could tell that they really liked me, and they really loved the fact that I had an entertainment background. I was a theater major, and they wanted me to produce, for example, the Miss Texas A&M pageant and the variety show. And so we're sitting in this circle, and I can tell that I was going to get the job, and I could also tell that there was a religious, there had been some talk of religion, and I just I didn't want I didn't want to be the token Jew if they didn't know it and they didn't find out till later. So at the end of the interview, I remember saying, excuse me, I feel like I really need to say this out loud to all of you. And just so everything's out on the table, I need you to know that I'm Jewish. And I looked around the circle to kind of see how that landed. I decided I had to talk to the elephant in the room because they weren't going to ask me. I'm sure it was illegal to ask me. And I said, I just want to make sure that that will work with your sensibility and culture. And I was kind of really easy about it. And they took a beat, and I saw them kind of laugh and relax. And they said, oh, that's fine. And I feel like I circumvented problems, any potential problems. And, of course, they could have figured out some way to not hire me at that point if they wanted to. But they went ahead and hired me anyway. But I didn't want to. I was the token Jew in high school. Thank you very much. So I know how that feels, and it's very uncomfortable. So I feel your pain, Elizabeth, that's who you were.
Yes.
It's not fun to be the only one of anything. It's not fun to be the only woman. It's not fun to be the only black. It's not the only, it's just not fun to be the only one of anything. So, there are enough ways in the world that separate us from others. So I really have seen in the workplace that a policy that can move us forward in a more positive way is if we look around, and as opposed to looking for the ways in which we're different, the baby boomers, bumping heads with the millennials, blah, 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 we read all the articles. How about we flip it and we look towards each other and we ask questions like, what are you really good at? How can we work together? Not what are all the reasons why we shouldn't work together. What are the reasons how we can, and how can it be fun, and how can I mentor you, and how can you mentor me? We've heard the term reverse mentoring. How about that one? Young people, 20-somethings, are mentoring executives in today's workplace because of usually in technology. But there's a whole phenomenon, you could Google it, called reverse mentoring. So that's what Sheryl Sandberg means. It's a whole new landscape out there, and we would be smart to respond to it in a positive way that's going to, allow us to not be distracted and upset and angry and not the token one of anything. And if we are, then it's, and we're going to pay a price for it, then you know what? It's time to go. It's time to, your life is very short, and we can move on to a more positive atmosphere.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the questions, but before we wrap up the call, Bonnie, if you could just share one more time how our listeners can connect with you online, learn more about your workshops, get your book, all of the important details there, and stay connected with you outside of this environment, that would be helpful.
Right. I'd love that. My website is BonnieLow-Kramen.com, and you can email me at Bonnie@BonnieLow-Kramen.com. And that's it. You can join my mailing list, and you would get updates on the workshops and the articles that I put out. I'm on most of the LinkedIn discussion groups, so if you're, LinkedIn allows you to join 50 of them, and it's a great way to kind of stay up and keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on in the landscape, so that it's not only what's happening in your city, it's what's happening all over the country, which is pretty interesting stuff. And I invite you to let me know what you think of the Sheryl Sandberg book if you choose to read it.
Perfect.
So thank you so much, Julie. I so appreciate the time tonight.
That concludes this evening's teleclass. Thanks again for participating. Have a great evening, everyone.